Sensational. The European Union is considering a plan to create peacekeeping forces. They could be deployed in Ukraine after the signing of a truce agreement with Russia. One of the most active participants in this process has been Britain, whose government is ready to send its soldiers to participate in the mission. Well, here's a paradox. The British peacekeepers themselves have sharply rejected this plan. Why the military refused to follow the government's directive, what is behind this scandalous decision, and how it might affect the situation in Ukraine? Watch.
British military personnel criticized their Prime Minister Keir Starmer's initiative to form a coalition willing to maintain peace in Ukraine. The idea was rejected by sources and political opponents who called it political theatre. According to a number of high-ranking officers in the British Army, Starmer is getting ahead of himself with his plans, journalists from The Telegraph write.
By the way, speaking of Starmer's position within Britain, yes. Perhaps allocate some part of the fleet to the Black Sea Basin. This is more or less acceptable. And possibly assistance. Ukrainian Mirages and Asics will be conducting air patrols, but including British planes. But Starmer's opposition says that this is realistic for now and justified. However, regarding the peacekeeping contingent itself, there are indeed significant questions being raised.
At the beginning of the month, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom stated that a number of countries are ready to ensure the enforcement of a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia. There is information in the media that about a dozen countries, including the United Kingdom, France, Turkey, Canada, and Australia, are discussing plans to send up to 30,000 troops to Ukraine. Other countries are ready to assist with weapons and logistics.
Such activity as that of Starmer himself, yes, or the risks in, let's say, seeking a new role for Britain, restoring certain imperial ambitions. Well, in principle, let's say rapprochement with Europe, yes, not in the economic vector, of course. It's not about that. It's not about the UK's rejoining the European Union, but quite a pragmatic game where Britain can ensure overall coordination, ensure data development, ensure the operation of an effective intelligence service. Europe can fund a lot in these areas of common security, and this, in principle, is now a common interest, since the challenges are currently unprecedented throughout the history of the European Union, at least.
A week ago, the Times reported, Keir, Starmer expressed readiness to deploy troops in Ukraine for a multi-year term to prevent a potential repeat invasion by Russia into Ukraine.
I think that, in fact, Starmer's initiatives, Britain's initiatives to deploy a contingent in Ukraine are definitely not liked of the Russian Federation. By the way, they have already said more than once, including Putin, that they are against, this is for the record, having European peacekeepers in Ukraine after the end of the active phase of the war. And also, based on these positions too, such initiatives by Starmer about European peacekeepers in Ukraine are not of interest to the United States, because the United States wants to claim the achievement of a truce for itself, a political advantage, and not share it with anyone.
Whether peacekeeping forces will be able to return fire if Russia violates its obligations is still unclear. At the same time, the British Prime Minister added that any plans regarding Ukraine after the ceasefire will require cooperation with the USA.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
London is accelerating the pace and scale of military planning to be ready to send a peacekeeping contingent to Ukraine after a ceasefire agreement is reached. This was stated by the government of the United Kingdom. British special forces have been put on standby for deployment, writes the iPaper. According to two military sources familiar with the directive, military planners tasked by the government to prepare forces for deployment have ordered special forces units to prepare for mobilization. The UK's Military Planning Command Centre and the Permanent Joint Headquarters have received directives to begin the process of deploying personnel and resources. From publications by the iPaper, without providing Ukraine with security guarantees, Putin will violate any peace agreement, Keir Starmer is convinced. That is why London and its allies are moving from political support for Kyiv to military planning.
But it's important that we do this. It is vital for us to do this work because we know one thing for sure. A deal that stands for nothing is something Putin will break. We know this because it has happened before, and I am absolutely certain it will happen again. Therefore, what you are doing today is vital for peace and security throughout Europe, for our NATO allies, and of course for the United Kingdom.
The UK is also prepared to deter potential aggression from Russia, as assured by the government. In 2024, London announced large-scale investments in the nuclear program. At that time, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak stated that by 2030, more than £760 million would be invested in the sector. One of the elements of the UK's nuclear deterrence is the Trident program. One submarine of the project can carry up to 16 ballistic missiles, each equipped with 12 warheads. This means that a single vessel can potentially deliver 192 warheads in one salvo. One Trident submarine is capable of very quickly incinerating 40 Russian cities. This is significant food for thought for Putin and should make any world leader wary. Putin knows what Trident submarines are capable of, and this is something he must consider in all his calculations when provoking the West. Russian air defense systems are not that great. Moreover, Russia is the largest country on Earth. It is impossible to protect it from ballistic missile attacks. Chris Perry, a retired Rear Admiral of the Royal Navy, commented to The Telegraph, "The preliminary number of countries ready to send peacekeepers to Ukraine is known. However, the start of the mission depends on how the peace negotiations progress, according to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. Moreover, the list may expand. For example, on March 21st, at a press conference in Kyiv, the President of the Czech Republic stated that his country is ready to consider such a scenario."
As for the coalition of the willing, I personally see it as a group of countries that are ready to act, not just talk. That's why I speak about concrete results. Yesterday there was a meeting at the level of commanders-in-chief in London. Its main goal is to discuss the modality of this potential military presence in Ukraine. And the Czech Republic is ready to be part of these negotiations. And if there is a final decision to create such forces, I truly believe that the Czech Republic will be part of them.
It is known that the core of the peacekeeping contingent will be troops from the United Kingdom and France. Meanwhile, the Allies are discussing the details of the future mission.
Rules of engagement, rules of self-defense, and what to do if a peacekeeping or stabilization mission is subjected to any attack. These are some of the most complex and difficult issues. It can be assumed that they will also be part of any negotiations during which such forces receive a mandate. Since the full-scale invasion that began in February 2022, it has intensified. The feeling that NATO might have to defend itself. Of course, operational training depends on the specific mission, but I think that overall Western European troops are already quite well prepared for deployment in Eastern Europe.
At the same time, the proposal for a UN-led peacekeeping mission is not considered by Kyiv as an alternative to the plans of European partners and security guarantees, stated the President of Ukraine. According to Volodymyr Zelensky, the UN will not be able to protect Ukraine from occupation or Putin's desire to start a war again.
That's all for now. Well, for more fiery news from the front, watch the next episode.